So with the trade deadline right around the corner, I wanted to go over some potential trade candidates that could be moved by Tuesday's deadline. Some are less likely, yet more intriguing than others, but hey, you never know what could happen in the wild world of the NFL. So let's talk about it right after. So the trade deadline is right around the corner, Tuesday, November 5th, and we've already seen several big moves, like the Jets trading for Davante Adams, the Chiefs trading for DeAndre Hopkins, the Bills got Amari Cooper prior to that, and then just recently the Ravens snagged Diontae Johnson from the Panthers. But there will inevitably be more moves as we near Tuesday's deadline. Usually when looking for realistic trade candidates, you try to find players that are either aging or are nearing the end of their contracts with teams that are bad and are potentially headed towards a rebuild. That was exactly the case with basically all four of those receivers I just mentioned. So with that being said, let's take a look at some of the most notable players that could be on the move in the coming days. Now I know I just outlined what makes a realistic trade candidate, but there are always exceptions, and these first two players are very intriguing names that have been thrown out there. And before I even get to those names, because at first they will seem kind of wild, I do want to point out that we have seen high-profile players traded prior to the deadline before, especially if they aren't happy with their situation. For example, back in 2019, the Jags traded cornerback Jalen Ramsey to the Rams for 2 first-round picks and a 4th-rounder. At the time, Ramsey was just 25 years old, still on his rookie deal, but was arguably the best corner in all of football. Now again, he was on his rookie deal, though the Rams extended him roughly a year later. The two names that I'm about to talk about, they're not on their rookie deal, makes it a little bit more difficult, but let's get into it. The first is Dexter Lawrence from the Giants. Just hear me out on this one. Yes, he is one of, if not the best defensive tackle in football right now. He leads the entire NFL in sacks with 9, is only 26 years old and under contract until 2028. But I'm not going to put anything past the Giants. You know, the front office who decided to pay Daniel Jones and not Saquon Barkley. Yeah, those guys. The G-men are 2-6 this year and appear to be moving full speed ahead towards a rebuild, so it's not completely out of the realm of possibilities that a contender could offer them a king's ransom they couldn't refuse. However, I would think even in the midst of a rebuild, Lawrence might be one of the guys you do not let go of and you build around him. Makes me think of like the Chiefs with Chris Jones on defense. You build around that guy almost at all costs, and Dexter Lawrence seems to be one of those guys. The next player feels a bit more likely than Lawrence, and I can't even fully explain why, but that is Titans defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons. He, just like Lawrence, is under contract, but through 2027, and is one of the best defensive players in the league. However, he too is on a terrible team that has already started selling off some of their best players this year. They traded DHop to the Chiefs, and a few hours later moved linebacker Ernest Jones to the Seahawks. I think it would probably take at least a first-round pick, maybe even plus some, to motivate the Giants or Titans to move off from their stud defensive tackles. But again, you can't completely rule out the possibilities here, especially if that team really needs D-line help. Lions, Aiden Hutchinson, not the same position or the same situation, but you get what I mean. Next up, the Panthers have reportedly been gauging Bryce Young's trade value ahead of the deadline, despite just recently shutting down 4 teams that inquired about him back in September, at least according to Jay Glazer. Bryce Young had a disastrous rookie season last year and got benched after 2 games this year, though he is back in the starting role after Andy Dalton suffered a thumb injury a few weeks ago. I have no idea what Carolina could get in return, but there's no chance it's even remotely close to what they gave up to get him. They traded a 1st and a 2nd rounder in 2023, as well as their 1st rounder in 2024, which ended up being Caleb Williams, holy hell, plus DJ Moore. All those picks to get Bryce Young last season. I would guess his value is somewhat similar to what the 49ers got for Trey Lance last year when they traded him for a 4th-round pick to the Cowboys. If you remember, the Niners traded 3 first-round picks to move up and draft Lance 3rd overall back in 2021. He was obviously a major bust, but they got bailed out by taking Brock Purdy with the last pick in the 2022 draft. Anyway, as far as who would want to trade for Bryce Young, I think a team could talk themselves into him based on the Panthers organization being an absolute train wreck, which means he never had a chance to succeed there in the first place. Okay, so maybe it's a similar situation to how Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold have found success later in their careers with better teams. So what team? Okay, what about the Rams? Maybe a team like the Rams could make a move for Bryce Young, and they let him sit behind Stafford for a year or two while he learns from one of the best offensive coaches in Sean McVay, and also one of the best quarterbacks in the game in Matt Stafford. Who knows how much gas he has left in the tank, talking about Stafford after all, though he has a couple years left on his deal with a more realistic out after the 2025 season. If you can get Bryce Young for like a 4th round pick and you're the Rams, do you do it? Well, possibly. The question is, will they be willing to give up one of their picks? Because the F the picks motto that they've been following for years has them only with a 1st, a 3rd, a 4th, and 3 6th round picks for 2025 at the moment. Now, let's stay with the Panthers here and talk about wide receiver Adam Thielen. He's far past his prime right now, 34 years old, yes, but he had 1,000 yards, over 100 catches last year with the aforementioned Bryce Young throwing him the ball. Now, aside from his age, the other concern with Thielen is that he suffered a hamstring injury in week 3, which has obviously hurt his production and kept him sidelined for over half the season. However, on October 23rd, his window to return from IR opened up, so I would think they have to add him back to the roster this week before there's even a possibility Thielen gets traded, but he is trending in the right direction and could be healthy. So a team could theoretically trade for him and give him a few weeks even on the roster to recover and make sure his hamstring is good to go. Diontae Johnson is a far more valuable player than Thielen at this point in their careers, and all the Panthers got in return for him was a 5th and a 6th round pick swap from the Ravens. Basically nothing at all. I think they were just ready to get rid of that guy completely. But with that being said, you're not going to get much out of Adam Thielen, but you could try and just recoup whatever assets are available. That's why I think maybe the Texans could come calling and asking. It's got to be a team like that, a team that really needs a wide receiver. Another wide receiver that could be on the move maybe is Mike Williams, even though things with him just got a bit more complicated. Before I touch on that, though, here's some Mike Williams context. The Jets signed him to a 1-year deal this past offseason for up to a lot of money, by the way, but he pretty quickly became Rodgers' 4th or 5th target behind Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, Tyler Conklin, and even running back Breece Hall. Then when they traded for Davante Adams, he became even more expendable. He isn't the same player he was a few years ago when he topped the 1,000-yard mark for the 2nd time in his career back in 2021. Then he tore his ACL early last year and is still trying to get back to the same player he was before the injury. With all that being said, though, he's still a serviceable veteran that could be a solid wide receiver 3 on a contending team. However, the Jets may be a little less motivated to move on from him now, as news came out today that Allen Lazard is heading to IR with a chest injury. So even if the Jets lost to the Texans on Thursday Night Football, I'm recording this a couple hours prior to the game, so I have no idea what's going to happen. But even if they lose, they may opt to hold on to Williams in spite of their season basically being over before it really began. If I'm the Jets, though, try and trade the guy. Get any sort of cap relief and draft capital you can out of this man. It's only going to help, especially if you fall to 2-7 on the year, and the playoffs are probably not happening. Anyway, with that being said, who do you think is the most likely player to be traded prior to the deadline? Somebody on the list of this video or somebody else completely? Let me know either way in the comments down below. And with that, I'll see y'all next time.